Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And that's Domino, who's frantically pacing at this moment, because I haven't given her her little shot of milk. And yes, I know you're not supposed to give a cat too much milk, but there we go. There we go. Yeah. It's just a little tiny bit that she gets as a... Oh, wait, what am I doing? Gotta put this in here. Alright, so I am in the middle of making coffee, but I had to do a video today because of a controversy that has sprung up in the in Twitter, basically. So, hang on, let me bring this back up closer. There we go. No need for you to be seeing my refrigerator. Oh, and now you can be seeing this magnificent view of Domino's backside or her front. And let me light up a pipe here and do a couple of other things too. I've got to get that coffee going because I am out of it today, I've got to tell you. Or I tell you what. Where was I? Oh yeah. So before anything else, here's my my pipe that is not quite yet lit. I want to bring your attention to the Last Vikings, and over here to Baptism of Fire, and there in the middle is the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. And Last Vikings has been selling incredibly well. It's been just hugely successful, and obviously Baptism of Fire was another very successful product. They're from the same line, basically. You can play the stuff from Last Vikings in a Baptism of Fire campaign because it's happening at the same time, right? So just one of them is Vikings and the other one is Poles. So if you've gotten one but you haven't gotten the other, you really should get them both. Gonzo Fantasy Companion is a whole other story. That is a game product that is full of interesting ways to make your game more gonzo, right? So it has a complete generator for you to create random character races, for you to create random mutants, for you to create intelligent animals, there's a bunch of different like magic stuff in there, monsters, characters, high-tech stuff, all sorts of things. And it's a source book for the World of the Last Sun setting, but you don't actually need to have the World of the Last Sun to use the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, because it's just got a bunch of... Each chapter is its own idea, its own kind of supplement. So, be sure to check all three of those out. And let me carry on with my attempted coffee making here. I should have done this before, sorry guys. But let me get to the point, the debate that has been going on. And it's largely because of a couple of new products, one of which I've already talked about here, called Daggerheart, or Daggerheart, as some people call it. And that is a game that was created by Critical Role, so it's very well known. And the other one that is popped up now is called MCDM, and it's by Matt Colville. Both of these were created in a reaction to the OGL scandal that happened in the previous year. And that OGL scandal essentially scared a lot of these bigger, more famous YouTube influencer celebrities who are obviously better known for their sheer celebrity status than for any kind of actual talent in game design, right? In fact, neither of them are talented at all in game design. And you know, Daggerheart was not even done by Matt Mercer. Matt Colville, I don't know. I know he did not do MCDM either, or whatever it's called. There's a name for the specific name for it, but the MCDM is the system or something. I don't know. But here's the thing. Both of these guys do these kind of live play stuff, right? I mean, obviously Critical Role does, that are full of drama and whatnot, right? And they have adopted a set of mechanics that I thought were practically dead, but now the theater kids are trying to revive it again, right? And it's going to be disgusting. So here's the essential thing. There are games out there that call themselves RPGs that are not RPGs. And let me, to explain this, I need to give you an example of something that could have happened but didn't, because the RPG hobby was strong. So way back in the 1970s, you had wargaming, miniature wargaming, where you played battles with large armies of miniatures. And out of this, there came a game called Chainmail, which was for fantasy battles. And from that, there came out a supplement that was about like playing just one character. Now imagine, like what actually happened is that product, which is called Dungeons and Dragons, right? It caught on, and the people who were making it realized that this was an entirely new direction of game, a totally different thing from war games, right? Therefore, you know, it was a descendant, but it wasn't the same. The aims were completely different. In a war game, you play a general commanding an entire army of men, right? And you have all these little men, and you move them around and whatnot, do the wargaming thing, right? In an RPG, you play one person, and you play that person interacting in the world. It's really very different, right? Like, the dungeon master is much more important in an RPG than a referee is in a wargame. A referee is just there to arbitrate a tough call. But in an RPG, the referee plays everybody except for the guy you're playing, and the guy that the other players are playing, right? So it is an enormous thing. And it's a thing that would have seemed really weird to a lot of wargamers in the 60s and 70s, right? So imagine, though, that Gygax or Arneson or someone didn't really feel very secure, thought that maybe this RPG thing was just too weird to succeed. And so they insisted instead on calling it a war game. My cat is trying to like lick the faucet because she seems to want water. And then when I open the faucet, maybe I've got it too hot for her. There we go. I turn on the faucet for her to drink, and then she doesn't want to drink. But when I turn it off, she's going to start trying to lick the tip of the faucet. Anyway, sorry, guys. Got distracted by my cat yet again. So imagine if they had said, though, that D&D is in fact a war game. That's all it is. It is in fact the perfect war game. It is the way war games should always have been played, but everybody before them was retarded and didn't understand that. And that Gary Gygax has created the one true war game, and it's called D&D, and it's a game where you play only one character, and so on and so forth, right? So if he had done that, obviously that would have caused a tremendous level of kind of conflict, you could say, because it's completely disingenuous, right? D&D is not a war game. D&D is a role-playing game. And it does different things. It was born from wargaming, but it isn't that. So fast forward now to the 2000s. Luckily, Gary Gygax was bold enough. He believed that his thing was a great thing. It was going to be bigger than wargaming. And so he went his own way. He did his own stuff. And everybody was the better for it. But in the 2000s, or the late 1990s, very late 1990s to early 2000s, you had another thing that came up. There was a group of pseudo-academics and quasi-intellectuals that started thinking really hard about RPGs, and they thought that actually they didn't like RPGs very much. They were arguing that RPGs were like 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours. That was a very common phrase. Or that it was a bunch of people thinking that they're enjoying themselves when they're not, which sounds very elitist, right? And that they thought that it was incoherent because RPGs have too many possible things you can do and things that they think are not what should be done. And the worst thing of all is that RPGs don't tell good stories. And that was their main issue. And so from all of that, these guys, led by a guy named Ron Edwards, aka Professor Bat Penis, they started a movement called The Forge, and Ron Edwards created a system, not a game system, a academic theory, or rather a pseudo-academic theory, because there's no actual proof behind it, where he suggested that there were only 3 kinds of games that can be played, which is the gamist, narrativist, and simulationist, and that you can only play one at a time. If you try to mix things, then you create an unsatisfactory experience. And that none of these types, not one of these types, is what an RPG actually looks like. But he claims that this is what real RPGs should be. So what a real RPG looks like is that you're playing a character. You're trying to immerse yourself in that character in a real world, a living world that you're living in the game, right? To him, he called it an impossible thing. And he said that it was not a real thing, and it's something that people should reject. To Ron Edwards and his friends, an RPG should be about creating a story, a coherent story, and that means that you are not playing your character. Your character is just a guy that you've got, like, as in a figurine that you have moved, that you're directly moving in the story, but you are taking all your choices at the meta level, at the higher level, where you are editing the world at every given moment, right? So that there isn't anything coherent. The world isn't a real place. The world is a backdrop. It's a storyboard, and you get to decide what's on the storyboard, right? So it's all being invented as it goes along. And that is not an RPG. However, the Forge people were too cowardly, probably deservedly so, because they realized that these types of games were they very soon, like they thought at first, I think, that they're going to take the world by storm and change everything. But it became very obvious to them that only the worst kind of ridiculous quasi-intellectuals, these kind of like snobby, these snobby kids that think that they're a lot smarter than they are because they bought a Richard Dawkins book or something, or they've got a DVD collection of French movies they haven't actually watched. These pseudo fakers, these fake academics, they thought that they were going to be taken as the new leadership. That was their dream, right? That they would be the new great luminaries like Gygax and Arneson of old, and would be in control of the entire hobby. And they were stopped, in part because of me, back into 2000s, right? I was their biggest enemy. I destroyed the whole basis of Ron Edwards' theories, and then went on to prove the difference. 4th edition D&D was based on the idea of a gamist game, according to the Forge theory, and it became the worst-selling edition of D&D until the 2024 edition, right? The worst of all time, apart from the 2024 edition. My game that I consulted on, and I directed the kind of the how we should approach 5th edition, along with Mike Merles, right? It was based instead on my own theories that were set up to counter the Forge about what an effective RPG should be. And what an RPG actually is, right? In other words, what it looks like. And D&D is the absolute example. It is completely incoherent. It has 3 different goals or more that are not going to be something that anyone is going to like all of them, right? But that doesn't matter, because each player is going to like the part that he likes, and that's part of the fun, right? And all of this stuff that is in there, I put it into 5th edition full bore, and It became the best-selling edition of all time, right? So these guys got wrecked. They got ruined. And they eventually tried to rename themselves as Story Gaming, and then they disappeared, right? But they never really disappeared, because most of them, what actually happened is most of them, when the Forge was shuttered in, I think, 2011, 2012, something like that, they kind of went underground for a few years. But then by 2014, 2015, all the same assholes came back as the new woke gamers, right? And the ones that were like taking over the scene with all their woke gaming, you know, like, so some of the people that are involved in, you know, the D&D YouTube influencer atmosphere, usually not the most successful ones, because you've got to be to at least some degree capable and likable to some form to be as successful as like the Critical Role people, right? So, but these are the guys that are doing like the second and third tier stuff. They're there. They were all ex-story gamers, right? And they've become a huge influence, I think, on the celebrity guys like Matt Mercer, who's basically a clueless clown, right? He's got no idea how to design an RPG. And so he gets somebody else to do it. And that somebody else isn't somebody who's actually got good skills. It's somebody who is connected vaguely to story gaming. Hence you get Daggerheart, right? And MCDM, Matt Colville, same difference, right? Matt Colville acts as though he's some great expert, but obviously he's not, because he's hired a half dozen people to make the game for him. And again, story gaming, right? They're using mechanics that are not actually RPG mechanics. If your mechanic is about changing something at the meta level based on what is for the plot, rather than a power that the character has, and that there's an actual mechanic to adjudicate that, that's story gaming. And that's not actually an RPG. So now obviously there is a kind of hybridization that has happened with stuff like Daggerheart and MCDM that has also happened in previous games. And for the most part, those hybridizations always fail. They don't work, because you really are trying to do two different things. You don't know if you're trying to pretend to be in a real world, or if you're trying to create a story that is a good story and you don't give a shit about your character in the real world, right? Or in that virtual real world. So you can't have it both ways. And this is something that a lot of people still keep arguing with me about on Twitter, right? Like they keep trying to pretend that story gaming it's just a different opinion, man. No, it's not a different opinion. It's a completely different game. It's a completely different thing that you are doing, and therefore is not an RPG. And the only reason that people don't understand this is because the story gamers themselves decided that they wanted to hijack RPGs instead of actually call what they're doing a different hobby, which it is. It is not the same hobby. Let me put it this way. D&D is not related to story gaming any more than it is relating to charades or Pictionary. Okay? Apart from the fact that story gaming came out of it, it's a totally different, like it's like Mad Libs is closer to story gaming than story gaming is to RPGs. They just look similar on the surface, and part of that is an intentional deception, intentional lies that were made by the liars who created story gaming, by these pseudo-intellectual shitheads that are trying to this very day to warp the actual purity of the hobby, right? The actual value of the game, which is immersion and emulation. Emulation means the creating of a believable world, right? And immersion is what the experience you have if you play a character long enough in that virtual world, and that virtual world is convincing enough, where you will see your character take on a life of his own within that world, and that you experience it as something real. Okay? Both of those things are explicitly told in story gaming to be impossible and to be dangerous even if they were, to the point that Professor Batdong declared that it's like having brain damage from child abuse to have those kind of things, those kind of experiences, right? So That is the difference. These are not role-playing games. They're not role-playing games. And you've got to be really attentive. Like, I mean, you might like story games. I don't know. I would never like them. They're monstrous, but some people like them. Some people who are, and even a few of those people are not deviants or degenerates of the worst kind. For whatever reason, there are a few people who kind of get into this sort of thing. It's obviously a moral failing, but it's not necessarily a fatal one. It's not necessarily something that will doom them forever, but it's possible that you might like it. But what you won't like is trying to run it as an RPG or trying to run an RPG as a story game. Like, that's how it all started, actually, is that Ron Edwards was pissed off because he got this game called Vampire the Masquerade, which claimed to be a storytelling game. And it turned out to be a game that was like an RPG, except that the DM was acting as the author, and you were just meant to kind of walk around and see the incredible stories that the DM creates, right? And that really pissed him off. And actually, that's kind of understandable, right? Because White Wolf games they're 100% RPGs, right? Like, Vampire is an RPG. It's an RPG where you have the stats, you have the collection. It's just that the way that you've been told to run Vampire is to run it like it's a TV show or a movie, and the DM is the director, and the players, if they're really lucky, are just kind of an audience that hangs around for the important parts, right? Like, because it's all about the glory of the DM. And it isn't actually a story-making game. It's a game where the DM has a plot, and that plot will happen no matter what, pretty much. Now, some people can run it differently because it is actually a real RPG. You could just ignore that DMing advice and run Vampire as a completely free-form world. It has no particular plot, right? It's just things are happening as they're happening in the world, based on the factions in the world, based on events that come up. You could even have random tables to generate those events and those factions, right? And then it would be a living world, But at the time, Ron Edwards, he wanted a game that created stories, and Vampire proved to not give that to him. And that pissed him off, and he decided to take revenge on our hobby. So you have to be watchful about this. And the reason why I am very convinced that both Daggerheart and MDMA, or whatever it's called, MCMA, yeah, whatever. The reason I'm convinced that those games are not going to last is, besides the fact that they are the vanity product of YouTube influencers, essentially, or Twitch influencers, whatever you want to call them. Aside from that, they have also been designed with fundamental flaws, because they in both of them, and it's the same one, so you can tell that this is part of the idea that's coming together. That's winning ground among this like particular group of disgusting YouTube influencers. Is that the mechanics are set up to create constant drama events, where if you fail by a certain way, then you have a kind of another twist occurs, and if you succeed, then you get another benefit, right? In Daggerheart, it literally has to happen every time you roll the dice. Every time you're either going to get a hope event or a fear event, right? And so it's a constant torrential hurricane of emotional drama that is happening as you're playing, right? And now MCMA or whatever is not quite the same, because it's got like a range. So if you fail very badly, you can fail with like terrible extra consequences, or if you succeed closely, you can get like additional benefits or things like that come out of nowhere, right? Oh, look, there's a sword, right? So it wasn't there in the world before, but it just appeared now because the story has changed, because all that matters is the story, right? The drama, in this case, they're replacing the story with the drama. It's no longer the fiction, which was the term that was used by the story gaming movement. It's now the drama, because these people are theater kids more than fake academics, right? So the old Forge people were all pseudo-academics. These people are all, ridiculous failed theater kids, right? Or, well, in the case of Mercer, failed actors, right? That are relegated to voice acting because they're just not quite good enough for the main screen. And they're looking not to create a living world, obviously. They're looking to create a story. You know, obviously that's what they do in Critical Role since forever, because they were just ignoring the rules for the most part. And they are looking to create maximum drama, because maximum drama is what sells on YouTube live play video things, right? Like it's not a good way to run an RPG. It's very stupid. If you've got constant maximum drama, then nothing is actually dramatic, right? It's just always, a series of stunning twists. You're running a soap opera, right? And it doesn't end up. Eventually, it becomes monotonous. The drama is so intense. Like it's like if you had like a movie by Michael Bay and there was like an explosion every second, guaranteed in the movie. Eventually, you're just not even going to notice the explosions are happening anymore. Because if there's an explosion in every second of the movie, then the explosions don't matter, right? They're not important anymore. So that's the same thing when you're like having constant drama at every round of action. There is drama, right? It's just the dumbest thing in the world. So that's my argument to you. I had a big debate recently on Twitter where I talk way more in depth than I can in this video about the difference in the mechanics of a story game versus an RPG, and why, contrary to what some people keep trying to insist, a story game is not an RPG. It's a completely different thing, and how that's justifiable. And I had some strong words with other people that were doing that. So if you want to, you're gonna have to check that out by looking it up on my X feed, because I don't think I'm gonna do another video about this. I just thought I'd bring it up again because it's been so long now, really, since the fall of the story gaming movement, that there's an entire new generation of gamers that have no idea about what the toxic, venomous poison story gaming is, and that it's become obvious to me now that it's actually trying to infiltrate its way back into the hobby. So that's everything for today. Currently smoking. Well, I haven't even managed to light it yet. I'm still like, my coffee is still going, and I just really wanted to hurry up and get this video done. So this is a Nirup Poker plus Argento Roots. Thank you very much.